Welcome back to the Adventure Box Podcast, the podcast where we explore the American Civil War, and well, truthfully, we've explored everything from ancient American times. Now, I'm doing a recap of this because this is our last time before summer. So at this point, we're going on vacation. It's going to be the 4th of July. Actually, this is going to be put out on, well, what was the 4th of July? 4th of July is, well, I can't see it here. Let me bring up my handy dandy phone and get the 4th of July, which is on this, let's see, Wednesday. Oh, actually, this will be on 4th of July. Yeah, that's right. We will still be posting this on the 4th of July. You don't need to listen to it, but yeah, it is what it is. We're doing it on the 4th of July. So, love for you to listen to it. This is where we are exploring the end of the Civil War. Well, we just did that on Monday. Today, we're doing the end of the Civil War in the sense of the end of a great president. So, but before I get to that, let me do a recap of everything we've done already. So, we've actually, throughout this whole year, we've done 2 different sets of podcasts. One was ancient civilizations. This is everything from ancient American history through Africa, through Egypt, then up to Israel. Then you had Babylon. Then you had the Persians. Then you came back over the Greeks and the Romans. And then we went to China. And now we're finishing up with India, which we'll actually finish up tomorrow in tomorrow's podcast on Thursday. So stay tuned for that. But at the same time, on the American side, we started off with early American history, being ancient civilizations, whether it's Native Americans, Southern people in the South. And I got a great special for you. So I did say we were going on vacation, but I'm actually working hard to get this one out. We just went on a 10-day trip down in South America, down in Peru. Why we did that? Because I wanted to know everything possible about the Incas. So we actually have experts in that area, tour guides, giving us the rundown of what was happening during that time. During the Incas, pre-Inca, and everything that's still established today. So we walked through everything from Machu Picchu, through other ruins, and we'll go through that in the next following weeks. Now, we're actually doing this right now so that we can actually go through and have a nice vacation, but still give you content to look through. This is like everything you need to know about the Incas. And hopefully next year we're going to do another one through like Rome, through Greece, through Israel, all these different places. Now, the hope is that I can actually be at some of these, like I was in Peru, but some of them I'm going to actually have locals do it as well. So, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it turns out well, but we will be giving these ones to you guys so that you can have more of an experience on what you're learning about than just what we're teaching you, because we could teach you more of a bird's eye view, but these people, oh man, they get you really in there, and they've got jokes and they got other things, and it's a great amount of fun. Plus, you get to see the actual place where it all happened. So, that being said, that's what we're doing. Sorry, my voice is about to go out. So, let's go back to the American Civil War. Today, we're going to be talking about the defining moment and how it still echoes today. So, my name is Zach Edwards, and today, we're stepping into Ford Theater on April 14th, 1865. Now, it was following a shockwave. This would create a shockwave that rippled across the wounded nation. So today we'll talk about 2 things. One, Abraham Lincoln's assassination. Mr. John Wilkes Booth, his motives, the manhunt, and the stunning reaction from the North and the South. The second thing we'll talk about is the war's long-term cost, the legacy that is the Civil War, from the human perspective, but also the economic, the constitutional, and how they remained the United States. How did this all happen and still we were able to unite back together? So let's dim the house lights, raise the curtains as a tragedy that changed history overnight occurs. Let me give it to you straight. Only 5 days earlier, Robert E. Lee had surrendered at Appomattox That's the courthouse in Virginia. Washington was delirious with relief. Delirious. It's not the best word. They were over the hills excited. And relief is right. They were feeling so much better that the war was finally coming to an end. So that evening, Lincoln decided to make everyone think that everything was all right again, to show that he didn't have many concerns. That evening, Lincoln decided to see a comedy. It was called Our American Cousin. His security guard wandered off to a nearby saloon at the time, thinking that the theater would be basically secure. Now, that's just one story. We're not actually quite sure what happened to his security guard. There is questions when it comes to that. But it was the worst possible lapse of judgment, basically, at the worst possible time. You got a civil war that was just ended. You had a lot of people very upset. And you had a security guard leave his post. Now, again, was he going to the saloon? I don't know. Most people, there's assumptions, there's theories of what happened, but no one actually knows what happened. But John Wilkes Booth, he knew what was happening because he had a plan. He was a celebrity all across the known United States. He was an actor that people liked. He was 26 years old, in the beginning of a thriving career. He was famous. They say he was handsome, and he was adored by the same stage that Lincoln was watching at the time. He was a fierce Southern sympathizer, though. Had earlier plotted to kidnap Lincoln and exchange him for Confederate POWs, prisoners of war. He believed that Lincoln had become a tyrant, a Caesar, destroying the Constitution. Wait. How does that rhetoric... Wait a second. I think they still use that rhetoric today against our president, our current president, Trump. It's funny. Tyrant, Caesar, they even use the word Hitler. Remember, Hitler wasn't there at that time, but they did call Lincoln Caesar. And then he was destroying the Constitution. Wow, this all sounds so familiar. And it still doesn't change. Where's the civility I called for on Monday? Not there, sadly enough. Conspiracies included Lewis Powell to basically attack the secretary. He was the one to attack Secretary Seward. And also George Atzerodt. And also target, he was the one that was supposed to target the Vice President, Andrew Johnson. But only Booth and Powell stayed around. All the rest of them vamoosed. They all left. They all got out of there. They didn't want anything to do with this. So only Booth and Powell stuck around. Now, let's go to the timing. So I think the theater started somewhere around 9 o'clock. It was 10:15 p.m. Booth slips through Lincoln's unguarded door. Now, let's go back a little bit further. Booth comes into the theater, a famous celebrity, a famous actor. Nobody had any questions. He walks up to Lincoln's booth. He's a celebrity. Probably to go talk to Mr. Lincoln. No problem there. 10:15 p.m. Booth slips through Lincoln's unguarded door. Shouts a line that only an actor could hear. Then fires a single shot from a Derringer into the back of Lincoln's head. At that point, a fight ensues. The people in the booth with Lincoln fight back, and Booth decides to leap to the stage, jumping from above, from the seats that Lincoln was sitting at, onto the stage, breaking his left femur. No, it was the fibula. And he cries, "Sic semper tyrannis," which means Thus always the tyrant. No. Thus always two tyrants. It was the Virginia motto. He collapsed into the night. Sorry, collapsed. He collapsed from his broken fibula. But he gets up and he disappears into the night. Washington plunges into chaos. Now, Lincoln, he's carried across the street into the Peterson's house. Family, cabinet members, generals, all gathered in there. Now remember, that happened at 10:15 p.m. At 7:22 a.m. April 15th, it is now said from the Secretary of State, I think it was the Secretary of State, says he now belongs to the ages. As Lincoln passed away, 7:22 a.m. April 15th, a day that will also live in infamy for a great leader that was killed. Now, the nation at the point was in shock. Northern cities draped in black. Church bells tolled for hours. Some ex-Confederates even cheered quietly. Most understood the assassination imperiled Southern hopes of lenient peace. That's right. It means that because of the assassination, they thought that the South was going to be burned and not given the lenient peace that Abraham Lincoln was promising. Andrew Johnson, though, he was the vice president. He was untested. He was not popular. He was a Southern loyalist to the Union. Like, he was a Unioner, but he was loyal to the Southerners. He was sworn in. Lincoln's plan for conciliatory reconstruction instantly became clouded. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Because it was up to Johnson, for one, and the North might have turned on them and said, burn it all. But this is what happened afterwards. So, first thing, they get out all the spies. All the Washington spies went into the cities trying to find out where, one, Booth was, and two, where the conspiracy came from. Booth hid in Maryland. He lived, basically embedded him in the swamps, thinking no one's going to look for me there. Then a Virginia tobacco barn. So from Maryland, he moves to Virginia. He's moving south. Union cavalry trap him April 26th. Again, remember that. April 15th is when Lincoln died. 26th is when he's surrounded. He refused to surrender, though. Shots were fired, and he died hours later. He actually fell from the barn as well. 8 conspirators tried by military commission. 4 were hung. 4 were imprisoned. Debate ever since of what happened. Here's some questions that have been asked. Did Booth act largely alone or reflect a deeper Confederate underground? The consensus? Conspiracy was small. Impact was enormous. That, my friends, was the end of Abraham Lincoln. But you gotta read the text. The textbooks has so much more about it. It has his wife's perspective. It has the Secretary of State's perspective, the Defense Secretary. All these different people that were actually there, you're able to hear their points of view of what actually happened. It's a fascinating read. So please, go read. Okay, now, what about the political consequences? Okay, Lincoln's death turned a potentially healing moment into a I was going to say catastrophic, but constitutional knife's edge. Very catastrophic. Nobody knew what was happening. There became what we call a leadership vacuum. What happens? Okay, you have this box. You suck all the air out. What happens? Well, one thing, you have no air in there. What happens if you open up just a little bit? Becomes a vacuum. It sucks in more air into that place. So Johnson inherits the presidency, but he lacks Lincoln's moral authority. He's a vice president, and that's made a president. He was not voted on specifically for that job. Radical Republicans soon clashed with him, because remember, he favored the South. Now, what about the Southern uncertainty? Many Southerners had accepted surrender, expecting Lincoln's, well, he stated it, with malice towards none. They wanted peace. They wanted to be done with the war. Now they feared that there was going to be punitive policies and punishment for Lincoln's death. Let's talk about the martyrdom. Lincoln's image transformed overnight from a controversial war president to a national saint, cementing the Union's victory as a moral, let's say, crusade. So Lincoln became who he. You know what? I have pictures. I keep forgetting to put them up. Okay, you gotta see this. So this is Lincoln before election. He actually grew his beard in order to win his election. That's right. He wanted to look a little bit more pristine, experienced, those type of things. This is Lincoln after the war. Very, very tired. He was probably one of the most worked men in the whole country. You can actually see his aging here. 1860, 1861. This is about when the war started. This is when he's elected. This is before he was elected. This is when he's elected. He grew out his beard to win the election. A little disheveled the next year when the war started. This is him. This is the image that most of you have embedded in your mind. A very stalwart, strong president. But if you look the next year, very tired. Very tired. And in the end, extremely tired before he's shot and assassinated. And he was assassinated not in February, but in April 15th, 1865. So this was about 3 months before that point, 2 months before that point, depending on what day it was. Okay. So this was Abraham Lincoln. And yes, I will actually show it. This is Mr. John Wilkes Booth dying in a barn, being burned down. Well, he climbed up and then fell out. And this is the end of Abraham Lincoln, with Wilkes shooting him in the back of the head. That takes such moral courage, shooting someone in the back or in the back of the head. Holy cow, what are you thinking? That's Abraham Lincoln, a strong president with moral authority and trying to bring peace to the nation. So what happened after the war? Right after the war. Not talking about Reconstruction yet. What happened right after the war? Let's talk about the human toll. How many soldiers died in that war? 750,000 soldiers were dead. Roughly 2.5% of the U.S. population. Unknown tens of thousands of civilians died as well, bringing it up to probably around 3% of the whole country population. 1 in 4 Southern white men of military age never returned. The entire communities lost a generation of people. They lost, some families never recovered because they didn't have any other sons. Truly, truly sad. Let's talk about this, the economic issues. Well, here's one. The Southern Railroads totally destroyed. You remember the neckties, Marshall's March? They would take those big bars of iron that they put the train on, and they made them into bow ties. They twisted them until you could not untwist them. The farmland also devastated. 60% of assets, the 60% of the wealth in the South had vanished. Northern industrial capacity surged, though. Steel, rail, banking ushered in the Gilded Age of expansion in the United States. All those railroads had to be revamped, redone. And who was the one building those rails? It was the North. So the North won out quite handsomely. the national currency is called greenbacks, and the income tax was introduced. Now, Abraham Lincoln's actually the one that introduced the temporary income tax to pay for the war. He had no money. He had to fund that war, so he put a national income tax. But then it was gone because it was not constitutional. It was a federal economic, the power of the federal government expanded greatly at this point after Abraham Lincoln. All of these different things that happened during the war, the federal power that was ingrained in the system became a permanent state. This is where you could literally say that the federal government got its claws in and it would not let go. Now, Trump is in there and he is trying to pry those claws out of the federal bureaucracy. You know how much I love bureaucrats, right? The unelected people that run this nation. Yeah, truthfully, it should be the senators, the congressmen, the president, and the courts. But no, we got bureaucrats who like to run Washington, D.C. Now, let's talk about the social revolution. 4 million enslaved people were emancipated overnight. Now, we just experienced Juneteenth. Juneteenth was when the federal government marched into Texas and said, "Why are these all slaves still?" They were supposed to be freed. The slaves had no clue. People in Texas were still enslaving the people, and that was the day, boom, everyone was now free. But here's another question. And actually, 13th Amendment ratified December 1865, emancipating all the slaves. But there's a question of citizenship and also voting rights. And this sets the stage for the 14th and 15th Amendment and a century-long struggle in civil rights. Again, when we talk about the Reconstruction, we're going to be talking about the Ku Klux Klan and how that actually started up as a political organization. That's right. That was a political organization started by the Democratic Party because they were trying to gain more power and to stop the citizenship, the voting rights that were being given to the African Americans. Remember, black Senator Hiram Rhodes Revels first won right after the Civil War. Right after the Civil War. I'm going to say that again. Okay, now came the question. Federal versus states powers. Union victory it's reasserted supremacy of the federal government. Again, the claws. They sink in. They do not let go. Doctrine of secession discredited. No more secession. You are not allowed to succeed as one of the states or many of the states. The U.S. basically transformed from plural, these United States, to singular, the United States. Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. Not until I started studying this. Now, here's another one. Memorial and cultural. What were some of the things that happened? Okay, Gettysburg Cemetery. These are battlefield parks you can actually attend to today. You can see the battlefields. You can see the cemeteries. Also, veterans reunions started happening. It shaped national identity. Now, there is one thing. It's called Lost Cause. It's the mythology in Southern romanticized Confederate fighting. It's complicated the racial Reconstruction. Now, we'll go over that when we go into the Reconstruction. But basically, the South did not want to change, and yet they were forced to change. Another one. Lincoln's vision of a new birth of freedom, remaining unfinished. It remained unfinished business, echoing into modern debates on inequality and equality. So this was when we talk about Reconstruction, we're going to be talking about this imbalance. All the African Americans, the enslaved people, the 4 million of them, were now free. How do you bring them into society with full rights? Or do you? Well, some people, like those in the South, the Democrats, did not want that to happen. Now remember, there's Northern Democrats and there's Southern Democrats, and the Northern Democrats were sympathetic to the Southern Democrats. They did not want that to happen. They did not see them as people. They saw them as property that was being stripped from them. So during this Reconstruction that we will be talking about in a month or so, it's the imbalance. You're going to have to figure out this balancing act. So from that cracks of a single pistol shot at Ford's Theater to the silent rows of military graves, the Civil War's end was both a moment of relief and the beginning of Americans' hardest questions. We've gone over some of these. Lincoln's assassination tested whether the nation could bind its wounds, could heal. The cost of lives and treasure reshaped government, economy, and even civil rights. Again, we will be talking about this when we go into the Reconstruction. And yet, as Lincoln believed, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, endured. That's it. So, thank you to this man here, Mr. Abraham Lincoln, for all he did with bringing back our Union. And a salute to him for all that he did, giving up his life for this Union that is now the United States of America. So join me next time on the Adventure Box podcast as we examine the first time for us, the Reconstruction, its bold promises, its bitter conflicts, and its lasting legacy on American democracy. Until then, keep asking why history matters and keep its echoes alive. Now, I got one question for you. So if you remember, Monday was what happened to the Confederate gold. Here's a question for you. What would you have done? Now, we're not going into the Reconstruction yet. I want to hear what you would have done if you were the president of the United States and wanted to bring peace between the two sides, the Northerners and the Southerners. I want to hear what you think. Please put it in the comments below or send me an email. I will mention it. I'll even put it onto the our YouTube channel. But I want to hear what you have to say. Please let me know, and we'll get it out there as fast as possible. Thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait for the next time with the Reconstruction. At the same time, remember, tomorrow we will be ending India. Thursday, last episode of ancient India and the Indus Valley civilization and everything else that was happening in the southern India area, southern Asian area. So until next time, thanks so much for joining us, and we will talk to you soon. Take care, y'all. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.